Hello, guys and gals, me, Mutahar, and ladies and gentlemen, I just want to talk about probably one of the greatest comebacks in a video game history. Now, I'm sure by the thumbnail of this video, I'm sure you probably figured out what I'm talking about. No Man's Sky. Apparently, the number you're seeing here is probably the highest player count this game has had since the actual launch of the game. Now, normally, a video game kind of starts off strong and just tapers off. But No Man's Sky is a little bit different. Now, to give you some context, I love space games. I'm a space slop enjoyer. If you give me a game about flying to space, that's pretty much all I need, okay? I'm already half pitching a tent just thinking about it. I played every single space game that's pretty much come out. Elite Dangerous, Star Citizen. I even played with some EVE Online. Then I got really into using Microsoft Excel for a while. And then, of course, No Man's Sky. Now, No Man's Sky, I think we all know, has had a pretty troubled launch, okay? We all know the story 9 years ago when this game dropped. Almost 10 years. We're getting old. No Man's Sky had probably one of the coolest release trailers. Like, this is one from E3 2014. I remember watching this with Amaru and Kyle. And I was pitching a tent. I was excited. I was ready to experience a space slop game. I mean, it had a whole world you walked around, which wasn't that big of a deal. But of course, towards the later half, you start seeing dinosaurs and shit. And then you actually board a ship, fly out into the atmosphere, and then of course, you are actually going from planet to planet. I remember at the time, just the ability to kind of do that in a video game blew me away. I grew up playing games like Freelancer and shit, where you never really transition from space to ground. That felt huge, Usually an open world is you're gonna be given a loading screen, Skyrim style, and then, you get to the next zone. No. In this game, you never are in a loading screen. You literally go from a planet and go all the way to another planet. And I remember when this game came out, I went out, I found it a little bit early, I bought into the hype like many people. And I'm going to say it, even when this game came out, for a while I was excited. I played it, made like a 40-minute video on my channel all the way back then. And it immediately dawned on me that a lot of the stuff that was kind of built in this game wasn't really there. Now, of course, a lot of people can say that Sean Murray lied, he misrepresented the game. I will say that obviously I think there was a lot of embellishment that happened at Hello Games. And, people rightfully roasted the No Man's Sky team for it, because it was like, hey, you're going to tell us this game has X, Y, and Z feature, but we find out it maybe only has a little bit of the X feature, and Y and Z are nowhere to be found. I remember for a while, one of the big things that people kind of ragged on this was apparently, at the time, multiplayer was kind of talked about, but then players actually met in the real world and found out that, no, actually, the multiplayer doesn't exist, which was its own controversy, one that I remember pretty specifically. But you know what? There's two choices that any game developer can do, okay? They can either not fucking work on the game and completely ignore it, and then the whole game dies right there, or you can always patch the game up and make a comeback. And you kind of seen it with games like Cyberpunk 2077, where launched absolute dog shit game on release. I think we all can agree it was definitely not perfect, especially if you were, God forbid, playing that on the consoles. But as time went on, they not only updated the game to add more features in, but they made an entirely amazing expansion pack. And then, of course, they even patched it beyond that. Now it's one of the best open world sort of RPG experiences that I would highly recommend to anybody, okay? Not every game is capable of doing such a comeback. No Man's Sky, on the other hand, has been doing just that. Now, when this game dropped on Word version 1.0, I actually went back for this video to play the original PlayStation release. And I'll tell you right now, I couldn't do it for more than an hour, just because the game was actually not that great, okay? It's a very bare bones experience, especially if you played recent No Man's Sky. In fact, it's so radically different in ways that even just the core how should you say it, the periodic table, just the elements and resources and the way the game worked was so substantially different compared to the current game. In the current game, it probably takes you about an hour to 2 hours to even get off the original planet that you're on, just because you're doing a bunch of other things. You're building bases now. You're goddamn doing actual exploration. But in the original game, it's actually pretty straightforward. You grab maybe 3 or 4 different types of resources in the beginning. You launch off. In fact, most of the stuff is super duper easy to repair. I think the only really cool part about this is obviously this is only a 3 gigabyte game at this point, of course. And to me, it's still just cool that you can at least render this infinite galaxy. I mean, it procedurally generates as you go. locally on your actual system. And again, compared to like other space games, a lot of these, exploration focused games, aside from like Starfield, are very much relegated to, again, being live services connected online. And that's the one thing that I've really appreciated from like No Man's Sky into it. But again, this is not a very deep and engaging game in the 1.0 phase. In fact, the objectives very much are just haphazardly put together. You really are just going to new planets, and you're going to sort of the same buildings over and over again. And, as far as the space races are considered, the space stations, most of these areas are very, very bare bones, obviously, because this is the 1.0 version of the game. So, if you were somebody playing No Man's Sky as it released, you might look at this and just go, yeah, this game isn't exciting, okay? A lot of the features that were advertised don't really seem there. And here is where it just feels kind of like a proof of concept for his infinite sandbox space exploration game. These are procedurally generated titles, so basically the luster for the fun kind of dies, especially for the original like 1.0 version of No Man's Sky, after like 3 hours. It is basically like if this game was made by like a AAA studio today, I could imagine all the insane AI integrations that they would put into the title. This was AI Sloppenstein before AI Sloppenstein became a thing. So that's pretty much where the original kind of resided. Now, obviously, if you look at the update list for No Man's Sky, 1.0, then they've got Foundation, Pathfinder, Atlas Rises, Next, Abyss, Visions, Beyond, Synthesis. Every single year, there's been a huge expansion release for this game that always has me coming back. And the thing about the expansions over here is, normally I think any game company could probably charge you like maybe 20 bucks, 15 bucks, or like charge you a battle pass each year for access to this content. But for some reason, and good reason, they've been doing this shit for free the entire time. Now, these guys have another game coming out called Light No Fire, so I imagine that a lot of the updates that are presented here are all stuff that they're doing in preparation to launch their next game that they definitely don't want to have a fuck up on. And I'm not joking when I say like big updates, like this is 6.0, but again, when you really look into it, it goes beyond just having ships. They also integrate like deep space exploration, and again, like actual habitats that you can bring your friends with inside. So again, these big ships are more than just big ships. They're actually like, gameplay changes. And I think that's a pretty important deal about it. You can scroll down just to patch notes over here. I mean, we were talking about multiplayer a little bit earlier, but the multiplayer is alive and well, and it's probably the best it's been for years now. New missions, new everything, and again, the reason why it's so tough to make a video on this as well is because if you just look at the updates for this, right, the amount of patches that have been released, you could be working on something for like a month, and then of course, within like, as soon as you're finished the video, they'll announce like another massive update, like Worlds. Worlds was a two-parter update that I was absolutely involved in, and like just completely thrown, I put everything aside just to play this stuff, and I was blown away that, again, it was all added entirely for free. So the reason why people are like signing up to play this game again is because Hello Games launched another massive expansion called Voyagers, which has added a new entire feature. It's extended the space stations, and it's finally allowed people to have like Corvette-class ships. So stuff that you're seeing like this, usually ships were like one-person affairs. Now apparently the entire community has been building the fucking Normandy, the Pillar of Autumn, like crazy-ass designs. And something that you would be seeing in other games as a paid expansion, once again, makes it here entirely for free. When they added base building to the game, players were making bases which had like complexity sizes like this. This is Bastion, for instance, where again, this is a suspended like city that you can go to, where again, somebody put this base together that you, the player, can go to right now and explore in your entire journey. And again, this is where the community really comes in clutch for this game. I have never seen a more friendly gaming community than No Man's Sky. 4 months ago, one post came from a Reddit account called Spirited Ad 3028. And this guy posted a planet that he was about to die in. This was a permadeath save, where he landed on the wrong planet. He's on a very tiny pillar surrounded by deep ocean. He's out of launch fuel. They've got no resources. They will survive a few seconds out of that ship. Now, what did the community do after this Reddit post went viral? Even Sean Murray, the guy was like, all right, I'm about to pour out a beer. But there's no reason to pour out a beer because the community came together and saved the guy. The community told this guy, hey, listen, all you gotta do is go into your menu, all right? You gotta dismantle the scanner tool that you have, and you'll gather just enough resources to launch yourself off this planet. And this man, as you can see, was actually saved from this hellish lightning nightmare planet. I mean, that is about the best a community can get, you know, especially normally with like video games, there's always toxicity these days. But when it comes to the No Man's Sky community, they will always come together to save their fellow man. Now, obviously, so much has changed into the game. So when I was recently playing it, obviously, one of the big things about No Man's Sky is now it has a full campaign, and it's had a campaign since, I believe, No Man's Sky Next or even beyond, where at least for the first, like, you know, few hours, you're guided on a path, which takes you all the way to the end, where you can then reset into a brand new galaxy of your choosing in the game. And apparently the amount of, like, you know, vastness in space is represented pretty well in No Man's Sky. Not only are there millions upon millions of planets in each galaxy, but there are, from my understanding, around 255 galaxies to go to. So if you think you want to explore everything possible, I don't even think it's humanely possible within one person's lifespan. But again, the internet will always surprise me when it comes to the level some gamers will take their fucking passion. But the thing about this game is, if you're somebody that has, like, I would say, like, some level of attention deficit disorder, this probably is the scariest game to play, because after, like, 4 hours in the current, like, build, you'll probably get access to, like, a whole bunch of extra side quests that take you on different paths. So some of them will cover things like outlaw stuff. Some of them will take you on guided story paths that are, like, part of previous DLCs. And there's things like settlement building, there's fucking constant stuff like building your exosuits, underwater aquatic bases. Just the base building in this game alone will sap away your time. There's one thing that I've always kind of said about No Man's Sky is that it really did have the best capacity to do a comeback, just because the original game was so procedurally generated, in that realistically it was just a building block for a much larger game. The original No Man's Sky didn't really launch with like a crazy story, just basically a very bare bones mystery for you to chase behind in the original build. But now it's got, like, again, a full campaign. It's got obviously, like, you know, base building. It's got like cross multiplayer. It's got community expeditions. Expeditions being one of the things that is my only contention point, but I'll get to that later. The actual game itself has so much exploration that I have put in probably hundreds of hours across numerous devices, PlayStation, PC. Playing this game on the Steam Deck alone is probably like 90% of my PC playtime, just because it runs so fucking well. Now, the other thing that I have to kind of really endorse about Voyagers and all this stuff too is, like, this is content that they probably could have charged you for, but they do put it in completely for free. And it's not just they gave you an extra ship to play around with, it really is just like an extra actual gameplay loop to chase after. And when I mean gameplay loop, I mean these ships you're actually like building, like, you know, features inside them, so refineries, like so on and so forth, crew berths, there's missions attached to this that net you rewards and everything too. And they genuinely do feel like big ships to fly, right? Before you were just flying like one ship, now you have a whole new feature set to go after. And I feel like, honestly, looking at other space games, it's like it just never stops with this one game. It just keeps going on and on and on. And I don't think it's going to stop until, like, somehow this guy finds a way to put in like an entire populated city inside a game. It's going to be insane. It's wild to see just the growth and development of this game, because ultimately it takes the premise of this one like sandbox procedurally generated title and just keeps adding extra building blocks. Again, these expansions, each of them come with their own varied path of gameplay, and that's why you're able to put in hundreds of hours, because again, if you're, depending on what type of player you are, if you're somebody that just wants to go hunt stuff, you know, fight enemies, you can do that. If you just want to make money, you can do that. If you want to explore for like rare goods, you can just do that. But you'll probably do a mixture of everything. But it's not one of those things where you're like chasing after one loop or one grind. It really is a game that just throws you in multiple directions, and you're just really exploring for the most part. It really taps in to that space exploration shit that like old school Elite games, Freelancer, like I used to play Freelancer Discovery mod a fair bit back in the day, and like this is this thing that like taps into me, okay? Because it really is just a world that it gives you. It gives you a million avenues to go and explore, and it always feels like for every loop that you jump into, like every hour that you play, you feel like you're meaningfully doing something in the game. Whether you're upgrading your ship, whether you're exploring a new planet, some planets can be absolutely fucking beautiful to look at. And then, of course, there's also like these little small guided story paths where you're doing things like piracy, merchant work, exploration, obviously, learning about like the various cultures and like languages in the game too. There's like a fuck ton of things that No Man's Sky has finally provided. And I'm pretty sure until their next game comes out, and even beyond that, I don't think they'll still, I think they'll still be constantly updating this title. It's just one of those games where it's so difficult to cover because it feels like for the last 10 years, I've never seen one company just consistently throw out free expansions like this. Now, the only two things that kind of get with me about this game is the lack of multiple biomes. Obviously, each planet really just has one specific biome, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but I think it's actually just a technical limitation of the engine that they probably have not been able to solve, because their next game is supposed to be the same concept like No Man's Sky, except on a actual life-sized version of Earth. And I imagine that game's going to have multiple biomes, so it's not something that they can't sort out down the road. The other thing that I really do not like about this game in some ways are the expeditions. Now, if you don't know what an expedition is, basically the game has these limited time events where you're doing like, you know, these almost like mini campaigns. But because it's limited time, like you kind of have to get them done within like, I think a few weeks, maybe a month. You know, it almost reminds me of another feature in a different game that's also a favorite of mine, which is Hitman, where they had these elusive targets. And the problem with this is that, you know, it's not that I don't care so much about, you know, the quality of the content. I just don't like the part where you can take away the content at any time, or it's limited to only a certain part. It almost like invokes a feeling of FOMO, like you have to play the game at a certain point. Thankfully, in No Man's Sky's case, you really are just expected to put in, I think, no more than like maybe 12 hours of time to finish certain expeditions. So you can do them. It's just I hate this concept in general, and I wish it just wasn't a part of gaming. But for those people watching, one of the cool things that they have is this GitHub project, which, or actually it's by CW Monkey here, NMS Expeditions, where you can actually experience like all these like, you know, actual expeditions. You can just highlight one, download them, follow the instructions, and just experience old content without having it be taken away from you after a period of time. And from what I understand, you can get the rewards out of this and just move on. And I highly recommend, if you've played enough No Man's Sky, go through every single one of these just so you can see the journey of this game's development and like patching. It's insane to see how much has been added over time. And obviously, look, comparing this to like other games like Star Citizen, which has $861 million, I don't even think Hello Games has seen anywhere close to that money. But the thing is, I feel like they've made probably the most accessible and perfect space exploration game. Comparing this to like Star Citizen or even like Elite Dangerous is not really all that good to do, just because those games are more simulation oriented. But in terms of raw features, it's kind of crazy to me to see like how much of an open world that exists and also runs without the connection to the internet even being needed. The fact that I can play this game anywhere I go on my Steam Deck without an online connection is just mind-blowing to me, because again, I know it's mostly procedurally generated shit. Like a lot of it is mostly done on my actual system on the fly. But I'm glad that this is like an offline friendly game so that at least versions of it are preserved. However, this game just updates so much that even if you buy like updated copies of the game, these copies get outdated before they even get released just because they patch the game like absolute madmen. It's insane. No Man's Sky has probably one of the best comebacks in video game history. And honestly, like if you were ever wanting to like spend $40, I think the game is like $40 now. If I actually check the store page price, the game is actually on sale, $31 right now. If you can pick it up on GOG, probably better. But yeah, the game is absolutely goddamn perfect. And, well, not perfect. No game is ever perfect. But if there was ever a space exploration game to recommend to somebody, especially one that, you know, didn't require you to connect to some live service, and one that also wasn't even completely released, this would be the one. It's crazy to think that in the fucking near 10 years that No Man's Sky has been out, it was hyped, released, panned, updated, and beloved, and games like Star Citizen still haven't even fucking come close to completion. It's insane to see. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and hopefully you like what you saw. I am out.